A conspiracy against truth. What now? Although it seems like we're waiting for what comes next, we're more like the frog in a pot of water coming to a boil, wondering what's for dinner. No one even considers that what comes next will bear a resemblance to our former lives. At best, our new normal will entail small businesses having failed, hordes of unemployed competing for low subsistence wages, tenants not paying rent, more divisiveness between haves and have-nots. At worst, martial law, a charitable totalitarianism, a surveillance state, fascism, a new world order. We feel powerless as we wait to see how things unfold and fall with our puny semblance of hope for the best, meanwhile doing our best to wait it out as comfortably as we can. Who's to blame? Is the problem the virus? We can't even agree about that. Our playing field is no longer information or facts or common sense. Everything is skewed. Everything is political. Obviously, there's vectors of infection, but people deny a virus has been isolated and identified, and whether the detected antibodies are antibodies at all. Without a common playing field, a consensus of facts, any step is a misstep. We've so far abandoned any notion of playing field that some regard Trump as ineptly vainglorious, while others believe he's playing five-dimensional chess, outmaneuvering the deep state. But inclining one way or the other is already a mistake. We need to return to facts. We used to have an illusion, clearly debunked, of two sides of the aisle arguing, compromising, and getting on with business. That lie is laid bare now that obstructionism is a party line. But we voted for obstructionism. Someone joked that when Donald Trump was elected, China said, "You see what democracy gets you?" It's funny because it's true. Democracy is the freedom to elect the most popular reality TV show star. Every day is exponentially more unreal. Where did reality turn so bleak? It's like in the movie The Sixth Sense, where we don't know at what point we left our senses behind. Or worse, in the movie Brazil, where we imagine we're embroiled in a dramatic rescue long after the battle is lost. Is this our beautiful house? In retrospect, the lie was there for a long time, but we acquiesced, we consented. Khizr Khan, though obviously partisan, powerfully urged Republicans to repudiate Trump as a representative of deep-seated hateful, racist, sexist, elitist, classist, self-dealing, and divisive factions. But even Khan was late to the party. I can't tell you exactly when we passed the threshold, but consider we've been corralled in more and more. It's easier to show how our sense of irreality cloaks what's going on when considering what's already been exposed and which has been promoted from a fringe claim to generally accepted truth, such as how Edward Snowden exposed the totalitarian framework spying on citizens under the guise of the Patriot Act, or how 9/11 was used to justify an unrelated sortie into Iraq based on unfounded rumor-mongering regarding Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, egged on by US jingoistic imperialistic propaganda, or the Me Too rape claims against various moguls, or of course Enron or the subprime mortgage scandals. We're soaking in it. But revealed lies are fed by other lies which are sacrosanct. Of course, it is heartbreaking to learn that dozens of passengers aboard hijacked jets managed to make final calls to loved ones. Thus, even in real time, as we learned about the horror of the attacks, we also learned of the victims' resolve to connect with, talk to, and hang up on their loved ones one last time. But all such calls were anachronistic. Even today's phones and towers can't make a connection, and 2001 technology renders such recorded phone calls impossible. Storylines fraught with impossibilities are not just wrong, however, and they aren't just mocking us. They enjoin our consent. Because to refute such a blatant lie would undermine what supports the lie: the media, our politicians, our neighbors, our sense of right and wrong, the systems of checks and balances, and even the general impossibility of such a vast network of conspiracy. These supports don't just support the lie, they support our whole scheme of who we are and the society we live in, and, by extension, our sense of safety and comfort in the status quo. Whether to confront a lie is the dilemma of whether I dare risk my comfort, or should I instead quietly relinquish whatever responsibility might have importuned itself upon my consciousness. What is threatening is not the information. The threat is physical and emotional, an existential threat which might thus trip a circuit breaker, so that instead of confronting inconvenient notions giving rise to such dissonance, I can simply reject it out of hand and preserve my perceived well-being. Thus, the lie about the 9/11 phone calls becomes sacrosanct because one can't reject it without the whole 9/11 narrative crumbling into dust. A flat-out refusal thus enjoins our consent, entrains us into the official narrative, binds us into the spell being cast. These blatant lies, obvious absurdities which don't require an engineering background or historical analyses, are different. They elicit this complicity. By turning a blind eye to blatant lies in order to preserve our sense of normalcy, we lose touch with our experience of truth. We reject the truth of our experience and abdicate that part of ourselves that knows otherwise. We instead turn to some version of events as an authority, and truth becomes factionalized. Whichever horn of the bull spellbinds me is still just one horn of the bull, like a perversion of the metaphor of the ancient blind men groping an elephant. But here we're groping a bull. As long as we consent to one version of lies or another, we'll be chasing each other round and round into an irreconcilable, chaotic vortex, while we try to calm ourselves and fulfill our prosperity gospel as best as we can, no doubt trying to make the world a better place. In this context, we could talk about movies or books we read, or our morality or families or feelings. But the truth is off limits. This explains the polarizing ideological divide between someone who refuses a lie and someone who refuses the truth. It is in this context that the term truther became an aspersion. The phone calls are one such low-hanging fruit for 9/11 because they defy possibility. Similarly, with regard to Sandy Hook Elementary School, photos of classroom windows before they were blasted out at the massacre present an impossibility, as well as the fact that the school was visibly non-compliant with the American Disabilities Act, thus precluding the possibility that the school was even in session at the time of the shooting. That we don't question the FDA's recommendation that everyone, from the most robust individual to the slightest child, drink 8 glasses of fluoridated water each day, and trust that no increasing concentration of fluoride from any water-based foods need ever be restricted for anyone, tacitly closes down our power of agency, or co-opts our power of agency in such respects. Similarly, though we know about electromagnetic fields, we put our devices next to our brains, our breasts, our genitals, because what else do you do? NASA expeditions, and even the distance we can see on the surface of God's round earth, are accepted on authority. Anyone who dares to challenge details regarding the implausibly perfect marksmanship of either the Sandy Hook shooter or the 9/11 pilots is subjected to ridicule and shaming, and records of any such challenge are buried among more patriotic search results, if not banned entirely for their topics or titles. The denial of truths alienate us from ourselves and each other. Without truth, we don't relate to anyone or anything, and our remaining ideas are just random agglomerations of isolated notions we permit ourselves, which might be added to or subtracted from based upon what's acceptable. In this context, alternative facts have as much standing as any others. Tinfoil hatters. The rabbit holes of conspiracy theories are vast, but what if these are not just fringe conspiracy theories per se, but core truths? Although whoever pronounces these might be ridiculed, the facts are incontrovertible. But a glimmer of truth is not enough. Even truth, if removed from context, is not only powerless, but toxic. If learning about 9/11 doesn't poison someone with despair or anxiety, and they then try to express themselves, their expression of such emotion is at such odds to our accepted version that they'd be infected with a violence to declaim lies, to rant, to become unhinged even, because to what lies might truth affix itself? Or it can be weaponized so that someone who convincingly breaches the blanket of secrecy and contextualizes and presents selective facts in support of some platform might have undue influence and factionalize people, turning one group against the other, even setting different factions upon each other in a death match. We're utterly manipulated. A boiling frog. Lies divide. Instead of experiencing truth in ourselves and with each other, our accepting impossibilities isolates us into subjectivities, thus relying instead upon the authority of politicians or scientists or the media or our likes and dislikes to comport reality to our requirements. But even our most cherished values and authorities might be fraught with fear or incredulous of the vastness of potential conspiracies. Though we watch a chemtrail blossom into a glorious sunset, we ask, what chemtrails? What authority can even entertain that chemtrails are real? The rejection of facts makes us complicit to the vast conspiracy perpetrated upon us. We agree to become tools in exchange for the opportunity to calm ourselves as best as we can with our nice prosperity gospel, with Amazon Prime no less, hoping tomorrow will be nicer.
Our guests are arriving on time, to the second.
They always do. And you always act like it's a miracle.
My dear Tattoo, when each guest is paying $50,000 for a 3-day stay on Fantasy Island, he or she deserves miracles.
Right, boss?
One version of a myth North Koreans are told and believe is that Kim Jong-un has no asshole, though another version is simply that he doesn't urinate or defecate because his bodily functions are so optimized. What do North Koreans hope for tomorrow? How are we different? Truth includes. But who's the victim? Although some justify this escapism by the council that to be in the world but not of it allows one to disclaim involvement in the mundane, nowhere is it said, abandon thy wits. On the contrary, to be in the world, and seek and ye shall find, might not just be clever descriptive formula of how to be in the world or how to find, but imperatives. Be in the world and seek, for the truth will set you free. These aren't just wake-up calls, they are calls to orient ourselves in our lives, to cast away dreams, focus, witness. The truth we avoid is not only facts that we might engage with outwardly. By denying truths outwardly and our own faculties and relations, we forfeit a relation with ourselves, we betray ourselves, we lose ourselves. Truth can unite, but no amount of yoga is going to enlighten a lie. Can I intimately face myself If I can't face the most blatant lie, can I get into heaven oblivious, or wearing a scowl on my face, or ignoring my shortcomings? It is our birthright to be able to stake out and claim truth, but that has a price. It requires honesty, sincerity, bravery, sacrifice. It requires confronting lies. It is not paranoid to mistrust the untrustworthy. Indeed, questioning the assault to our sense of truth represents an emergence from fear of something inimical towards something in which we have a shared interest. And truths connect with each other. Although this might set us up to risk entertaining too many far-out theories of everything, and we might even set off on mistaken paths, it clearly represents opening oneself to truth rather than shutting oneself off. And it is better to have set off with truth and possibly have to reevaluate and backtrack a bit than to die of congestive heart failure or fear from couch potato inactivity. Ultimately, this is not about conspiracies. It is about what I allow myself to know and to trust about the world and about myself. Hopefully, as lies are dispelled, I can wake up to truth innerly and outerly and to relationships among peers. Whatever narrative emerges is not just some intellectual fact set, but is our attempt to fulfill the roles of the cosmic particles we each represent in relationship to everything with respect to form, function, and love. Although it seems like we're waiting for what comes next, it's up to us to step up or not. Where this comes from. More and more, I feel at a loss to communicate with others because we live in different worlds and speak different languages. The rift is bad enough when discussing any news about one politician who must know that 9/11 is a farce and another politician who must also know. And these same politicians pretending that nothing so inbred as 9/11 happened engage in further and further antics. No one's going to call them on it. It seemed well and good enough to be in the world but not of it, and desist from challenging others who are obviously not going to be convinced anyway. Lately, though, I see more lies. Even my trusted media outlets are running such cheap, transparent fake-outs, and the media outlet that seems wrong seems right, but both fraught with lies. Of course, not all conversations are about 9/11, but how can one talk about Sandy Hook, or question something about COVID, or talk about anything really? It gets alienating. And anything else to talk about is so self-involved. Also, we all see chemtrails. They are more blatant than ever, but God forbid you or the media mention that tinfoil hat notion. Talking about things that are real is impossible. Lately, fakery seems to be on steroids, turned up a few notches, as though all chips are in, and the rift between me and my peers and lack of a common language precludes conversation. Meanwhile, a friend was upset that people supposedly on a spiritual path didn't care about worldly truth such as toxins and hidden agendas. At the time, I argued that one's experience of truth was not based on external events, that the outer world was just so much food for one's inner life. But then I had misgivings. Waking up is not secluded. It is about how I live my life. It's axiomatic that we open to truth rather than inventing one, that the truth includes what we otherwise experience as separate. And there is a suggestion that there are parallels, not just as above, so below, but that the manner in which we interact with outer things is the manner in which we regard inner things. This last suggests that if we accept lies outerly, We must be accepting lies to ourselves innerly, and obviously, one cannot wake up innerly as long as we accept lies about ourselves. But another thing is the conception of our growth being in the direction of waking up. That suggests we're asleep, or even as in the movie The Matrix, that we are imagining our lives. The idea that society is lulled to complacency or even hypnotized has been around for a while, but I heard the idea that we are spellbound, literally spellbound, from YouTuber UAP. I don't agree with all his ideas. For instance, I believe playing down enforced masks and hand washing and social distance in response to COVID, whatever it is as idiotic as playing down water in response to a fire, that he's barking up the wrong tree, and a few other reservations. But his alternative histories are compelling, and with regard to being spellbound, one of his approaches to deconstruct familiar narratives seems remarkably effective. It is reminiscent of Mystery Science Theater 3000's riffing bad movies. You might replay a familiar narrative punctuated by a laugh track or his mockery. Consider how a presentation might come across with and without a laugh track when NASA boasts that its spacesuit, made of a thin shell, can withstand the vacuum of space on the outside and Earth-level pressurization on the inside while remaining flexible and not bursting. He renders the villains as cartoonishly fiendish. What impressed me was his use of laughter to undermine suggestion, rendering fakery visible, and what is seen thereby, if one permits oneself to see, can't be unseen. It loosens the binding of the malicious spellcraft under which we live. All these ideas, I owed it to the ideas and to myself to put it in words and to share it, or else it is just thought up in the matrix where not even I really exist. I recognize that this is not gospel, and the ideas are thunk up connections as they presented themselves and were developed by me. I don't think this will wake anyone up per se, but it might inform people interested in entry points in broaching topics with others. Let me know in the comments. Take them for what they're worth. Feel free to reject, and thank you for your consideration.